Hello. Cringe Crew, Music Podcast, Series 2. Holy shit, we're back doing this again. Brand new format. Instead of having three of us pick an album every episode and then talking about it, I figured that we'd kind of take some inspiration from the movie podcast and do an entire discography. So, in this kind of first, I guess, season, if you want to call it that, we're doing Radiohead. I've been listening to these guys off and on for quite a bit. I've been familiar with their bigger albums, Kid A, OK Computer, and then more recently going back into their back catalog and listening to their debut and In Rainbows and all that stuff. But we've got a new host, replacement for Steven, who we now no longer get to wait for. We have Ted on here permanently.
No longer get to wait for.
Oh my god.
Oh man, nice to be here though. I'm excited.
Yeah. But yeah, shortly after we finished the old series, I was watching the movie podcast. I like what you guys are doing over there, so I figured, why don't we apply that format to the music podcast? I feel like that could work. So I guess kind of before we get started, does anybody else other than me have any experience with Radiohead at all? Outside of, I guess, Creep?
No.
I was gonna say they have, from my understanding, right, it's like a weird cult following, and there's a handful of songs that like I've listened to, but then the people that listen to Radiohead that I know like only listen to Radiohead. But yeah, no real like personal attachment to them.
Okay, so this should be interesting then. So kind of starting with their debut album, Pablo Honey. That's the album that has Creep on it. It's the song that literally everybody who knows anything about Radiohead knows. If you've heard no other song, you've heard Creep. Radiohead kind of started while they were attending school. They went under a different name. Let's see. The band was originally called On a Friday, and then after they signed to EMI, the label wanted them to change their name, and so the name Radiohead comes from the Talking Heads song of the same name off of their album True Stories. The name of the album Pablo Honey comes from some kind of like radio prank show thing, I think. Is that correct? Something like that? Yeah. Anyway, yeah, a little bit of background on the album. Kind of their debut came out in the 90s, and as such, it kind of sounds like a lot of alternative rock albums in the 90s. And as we get deeper into their discography, you'll kind of see how they went away from this sound and kind of evolved, because I've heard their later stuff, and going back to this sounds like a completely different band to me. But we'll get there. So, yeah, we're just going to go track by track here, pause in between each one, and give our thoughts on it. So we're going to start with the first track, You.
Right off the bat, it felt, the guitar reminded me of, like, deeper cuts from older Pearl Jam albums. Mm-hmm. It was kind of, like, grungy, but definitely, like, lighter than grunge, poppier than grunge, I guess. Definitely felt like it fit that 90s theme, though. Lyrics were relatively simple, and everything flowed together pretty smoothly, but it's kind of grungy.
Okay. Conley, you can go next if you want.
Okay. Yeah, I mentioned it earlier. I haven't really listened to anything really by Radiohead. I think, Mike, in the last music podcast, I think you picked a Radiohead album at least once.
We did Amnesiac, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that's when we did. So other than that and Creep, I really hadn't heard anything from Radiohead. I definitely feel this like early 90s alternative grunge influence in them, yeah. His voice is I like it. It's just it's definitely more almost different than what I remember.
Yeah. Like I said, going back from later stuff, which I've listened to more than this, when I listened to this for the first time, this sounded like a completely different band to me. And there definitely is that kind of 90s guitar tone going on. It's very grungy. It definitely has that going on. But as for, the background on the song, it seems to be about people blindly following higher authority figures and how it can lead to the end of society, and it's kind of disguised as a love song in a way. But yeah, this is one of my favorites off the album. It's a good way to start it off, in my opinion. All right, and with that, we can go into track number 2, which is Creep.
But I'm a creep.
Obviously, heard Creep a million times. Rock band that Creep is on, whatever the case is, that you hear it a trillion times. That's how everybody knows Radiohead. I guess I just had either forgotten or didn't remember that like there was so much complexity to this song. Like the whole thing just kind of builds up towards the end. The vocal range is really good. I forgot entirely about the piano at the end. The guitar, like messes with different volumes, but also gets more complex. Like I forgot that there was so much that went into this song, really.
Yeah, I mean, this is I thought it was a little bit, I guess, interesting from the very last song. His voice is kind of a little bit lower, I guess, a little bit more in that breathy range. I definitely feel a little bit of, I mean, obviously this is going to be, Radiohead's good at their ability of conveying emotion, but I still feel like I feel like I'm getting more of like the emotion out of this song. And yeah, I kind of thought this was, even though it was like slower, it had a loudness to it, if that makes sense.
What's there to say about Creep? It's their most widely known song, most popular song for a reason. There's solid instrumentation all around on this. Tom's voice is really good on this. But despite this, over the years, Radiohead famously don't really like this song much these days, and they rarely play it live, probably because of how overplayed and popular it is, whatever. There's actually a song about this song on their next album, The Bends, My Iron Lung, so we'll get to that one when we talk about The Bends, I'm sure. But kind of background on the album, according to Tom York, it's about an inebriated man who tries to get the attention of a woman that he's attracted to by kind of stalking her, and then in the end he lacks the self-confidence to face her and feels that subconsciously he is her. While on the flip side, guitarist Johnny Greenwood would say that it's a happy song about recognizing what you are. So kind of background on the song there. But yeah, we can move on to track number 3. How do you...
Well, this one felt even pretty radically different from the first two. There was a whole lot more speed. There was a whole lot more noise, I guess. Like, there were a lot more things going on. Obviously, like, the white noise section there at the end where I felt like there were just, 80 different tracks worth of stuff playing. But, like, the guitar was more upbeat. I think this one had a larger vocal range. But honestly, it doesn't sound even like the same artist from the first two songs. Like I think the progression, transitioning from Creep into this one, it sits in a strange place. But I think it was pretty good. It almost brought me to like, some of the more radio played like Ramones songs, like where it's kind of poppy and upbeat, with similar themes to what we've heard in the first two songs, I think.
Yeah. I was also thinking that so far each song has been actually significantly different from each other, just in like the way they're played, just the structure of them has been surprisingly different from each other. And yeah, this one definitely had a more pop, like kind of pop rock kind of influence in there, but I actually always love the like kind of random white noise shit. So hearing that stuff at the end was interesting. It was like I said, different from the other two and very interesting.
Yeah, I'll echo the same thing. This one's very different, especially transitioning immediately after Creep. And again, kind of echoing what I said before, this, having heard what they do in later albums, this still does not even remotely sound like the same band. Lots more kind of, I think, punk vibes going on this. There's a line in this where he says he's a stupid baby who turned into a powerful freak that I thought was kind of funny. But yeah, it's an alright track, I guess. We'll kind of see how it stacks up with the rest of the album once we finish everything else. But moving on, track number 4, Stop Whispering.
Well, I felt this was a pretty good follow-up to the last one. I mean, there was still a lot of like that rebellious punk spirit in the lyrics. The music changing time, changing volumes. I thought it was pretty cool. I felt that it sat nicely behind the last one. But this is probably my favorite one so far. I really enjoyed the pace, the timing. All of it just kind of flowed together really nicely.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not necessarily want to say that this is like staunchly different from the last one, but from the beginning, I kind of got that more like acoustic like feel to it, and it wasn't a 180, but it's Radiohead is showing a lot of variety, I'd say, in the first 4 songs that I hadn't really noticed. It's really good. Actually, the one thing that I thought was that I know at first I was like, you know what, this kind of sound, I was like, this sounds kind of 90s, but this song I was like, I feel like I could definitely hear a more current like pop punk or like current alternative band playing this song too.
Not that I've listened to a whole lot of U2, but there's like been a few elements so far that I could maybe compare to some of the U2 tracks that I've heard. It definitely, maybe there's some influence there going on, I'm not really sure. But again, being that this came out in the 90s, it kind of has that 90s sound, I still think. Overall, I think it's a solid track. Not really a whole lot to say about it otherwise. But from there, we can move on to track number 5, Thinking About You.
Thinking about you.
Who writes the lyrics, man? Because I just like after this one, I kind of just want to give him a hug, dude.
I think Tom York writes most of the lyrics. Yeah,
I like the music was super simple, which again, hard left turn from where the last 2 that we just heard. Mm-hmm. But it was a hyper focus on the lyrics for me, and it was just kind of really sad. Like he thinks so little of himself. I want to give Tom a hug.
Yeah, I mean, I said the last one started out acoustic, and then this one that's actually pretty much acoustic. This one definitely, I feel. I mentioned it before. I definitely feel his emotion in this. You can feel it in this. Yeah.
Yeah, like even at the beginning, Radiohead was really good at just conveying emotion through a track. Tom is just really good at that. Interesting thing, there is another version of this track that appeared on their demo as well as their early EPs that were faster and had more guitars on it. So maybe go back and listen to that one and compare it if you want. But yeah, the lyrics in this are definitely like about insecurity and desperation, and another possible interpretation is that it focuses on the experience of being left behind by someone who's achieved fame in some way. So very, very depresso. Moving on to track number 6, Anyone Can Play Guitar.
Anyone can play guitar.
So when I listen to new albums, usually like I listen to them straightforward on purpose because I feel like there's some sort of like cohesion, there's story to tell, and this one, like, so far it just feels like I've been listening on shuffle. And I think this is the first time where, like, even though the genre definitely doesn't line up from Thinking About You, like, the lyrics seem to follow up, right? That, like, you know, where we went from sad, this one started to seem like, hey, I might still not be where I want to be, but I have aspirations to move forward, right? That, like, lyrically it followed up, even if it sounded like 2 completely different genres. But I think this one definitely sounded much more 90s and back to that grungy kind of sound. Also super technically complex. Like there were a whole lot of like difficult parts in there for all of the instruments, really. And even for Tom, again, with his vocals, like this one was technically complex, and I was really impressed.
Yeah, this one definitely went back to that more grungy kind of sound. I'm a sucker for that kind of bass. I love that kind of bass line I could hear. I was also really enjoying the different guitar sections that they did, because you're right, they had a lot of the more complex like guitar patterns and chords that I was like, oh, this is like interesting to try and parse out. But yeah, that one was very good. And again, I do think that the lyrics are kind of meeting each other. It's kind of a continuation, while the sound feel is kind of going back to the grunge. But it's really good.
Yeah. Contrasting with the previous song, which was more depressing, this one goes back to being more upbeat, kind of rock sound with some grunge influence there. Background on this track seems to be that Tom York is kind of dunking on people that seek validation through rock stardom in a way. That's kind of see that with the Jim Morrison line. I guess Tom doesn't really like Jim Morrison much. But there's a well-known video of them performing this song for MTV where Tom screams at the camera and then jumps into the pool. I haven't seen that whole video, but I know which one they're talking about, so check that out, I guess. But yeah, solid track overall. Moving on to track number 7, Ripcord.
This one, especially I think compared to the last couple, just felt super simple. It was kind of repetitive. It didn't really stand out a whole lot, and the vibe that I got from it was mostly just like 90s pop that could be used as the background to like an American Pie movie. Like, it just kind of, not a whole lot to say about it. It wasn't bad. It just kind of was.
Yeah, I definitely felt the like fastier pop, much more of a pop influence kind of vibe. This definitely sounds like something that you would hear in the early 90s on the popular rock radio, on just the popular radio or something. Not saying that's a bad thing, but yeah, I definitely felt like this one was a slightly more accessible, I guess you could say. It was good though. I still enjoyed it.
Agree with what you guys are saying. It's kind of a basic just 90s rock track. But I still think that this is one of my favorites on the album. I like some of the guitar stuff and drum stuff going on, especially at the very end. Themes on this seem to be comparing the transition from childhood to adulthood to jumping out of an airplane without a parachute. So I can kind of see that a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, moving on to track number 8, Vegetable.
So this one was kind of like a whirlwind of genres for me, because at the very beginning, like I was really expecting like a country song. As we got to the first verse, it sounded like it was going to sound more like the Goo Goo Dolls or something equally like 90s alternative. And then by the time we started reaching chorus, there was a whole lot of like passionate emo themes. But like we were mentioning before, to echo you guys again, is that like I think there's a really strong portrayal of emotion here. You can feel all of the things that he's feeling, even so early in Radiohead's, production.
Yeah, I felt honestly a lot of the same. Tom is not someone that I had before really like thought about being this emotional, but now listening to it, I definitely get it, and I really, really loved that guitar work starting from like the bridge on. Like, I still love it no matter what, but like that, I started to hear. I think he decided to drop into something a little different during the bridge into the chorus. I was into the second chorus. I was like, man, this is unique. I really liked it a lot.
Yeah, there's some really cool and almost beautiful parts to this song that I would say for sure. I'm kind of going through the Genius page for the lyrics, and Genius includes annotations for some of the tracks here so that, people can kind of give their interpretations on some of the lyrics. Mm-hmm. And there's a part here for when he says, "I'm not a vegetable." Mm-hmm. And if you click on it, it says, "This is a lie. Tom York is a vegetable."
Uh-huh. I saw that.
There's also another part here where he says, "I never wanted any broken bones," and they're saying most of the song is about how the band hated Bones to the point where they wouldn't play it at live shows, and they're just like, "Yeah, I don't like Bones."
What about the one above it? I
fought hard, died long. Tom's Viagra wore off. Got some fucking meme lords on Radiohead's Genius lyrics, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, getting back to the song, I think it's solid. It's really good. So that's what's next. Track number 9, "Prove Yourself."
Okay, so the guitar kind of felt like this one kind of flowed in from the last one, like it still had that kind of country-ish twang. But then the rest of it just kind of evolved repeatedly. I thought this was the like highest production value I've experienced so far, especially because there were so many sound changes. I thought it was mixed really well. Like the volumes and the layering all just seemed to make really good sense and make a really smooth, cohesive track to have so many things going on.
Yeah, I've also started, like Mike said, I'm also looking at some of the Genius stuff, and this song definitely you feel the heaviness behind some of his lyrics. I'm trying to think of what else to say about this, because like this kind of song also hits home for me, and I'm sure a lot of other people. And I don't know, it's just really good.
Yeah, I thought it was cool how the track kind of evolved, kind of going from the acoustic stuff before and kind of, starting out maybe similar to that in a bit, and then just evolving into just a solid rock track with a lot of layers and a lot of things going on. Going back to what Conley said, yeah, the lyrics on this one are kind of heavy. Lots of suicidal themes here. Yeah, not really a whole lot else to say about that. I think it's a solid track. Getting to the end of the album here. A couple more tracks left to go. Number 10, "I Can't."
We're back to just, he's feeling sad. Like the music was super light and flowery, but like more lyrics that are just, Tom needs a hug, dude. There's not much more to it than Tom needs a hug.
Yeah, I was thinking that the music definitely has a more of an upbeat kind of feel to it, while his lyrics are definitely more focused on mental health. And like, the first 2 or 3 lines, I was like, oh, this is just talking about his stress, anxiety. I was like, oh, this is mental health a lot. And I was like, it kind of fits into the theme of this, that yeah, I just want to give Tom a fucking hug.
Yeah, like, what was going on in 1993 that had you so sad, man? Like,
goddamn.
I'm surprised that there's just so many just depressing songs on this so far.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, and emotion's one thing, but like it's starting to feel like it's half the album, right? Like, how does the band not look at him halfway through writing this and just be like, "Bro, are you all right, dude?"
Yeah.
Yeah, not really a whole lot to say about this. The instrumentals on this, I think, are pretty solid. There are a few moments on this where I think that Tom's voice is kind of muddied in the instrumentals a little bit, but other than that, I don't really have any other complaints. But yeah, solid track, but somebody give Tom a hug. All right, track number 11, "Lurgy."
I mean, I guess it was nice that there was some hope in this one that we didn't get out of the last few. Like, it was significantly less sad, but it also sounded like, with Tom's voice, it was like, even the hope that came out of this song, it sounded like he was trying to convince himself rather than like portraying what he's actually feeling. I don't know. This one just kind of sat in a strange way. It was pretty light. It was pretty simple, I guess, not super complex music, but I thought it was really well done. I liked it.
Yeah, I also thought that that this could be one of the more simplistic productions, which isn't a bad thing. I think it actually lends itself pretty well to the also rather simplistic style, like lyric form, which obviously have a much deeper meaning to them. But just from a surface face value, I kind of like the comparison. I also really enjoyed they had a lot of layering towards the end. I'm noticing that Radiohead has a lot of layering. Again, not a bad thing, but they do a lot of that.
Yeah, similar themes to the last batch of tracks, kind of more on the depressing side, but he's feeling better, maybe. So a little bit of hope there, I guess. again, simplistic track, especially with the lyrics and maybe the instrumentals to some extent. But again, not a bad thing. I still think it's a pretty solid track overall. All right, so moving on to the last track, number 12, Blowout.
I think that there was a whole lot of like unifying pieces to this song for the rest of the album, so I'm super happy that it came last. It felt like a lot of the things we've heard in other songs really got broken down. We drew in deeper to those in this, and with a lot of the better parts of the album too. I mean, still that kind of grungy sound, still some really layered, like complex instrumentals. I think there was a lot going on here, and there was a lot to focus on. But I do think that it was a really, really great place to end everything we've heard so far.
Yeah. This one kind of, I don't necessarily want to say goes back on the last song, but it definitely kind of gives the whole album that kind of theme of sort of like self-doubt, kind of this just kind of a general overall feel. I mean, he says, everything I touch turns to stone. I mean, yeah, that sounds kind of negative. He sounds a little bit down on himself for it, even though he thinks he was getting better. It was more depressing, but it still had a very complex, very, I'd say, almost like energetic production and mix. Yeah, I think it works good as a closer for this album. Yeah.
Yeah. I've listened to this before, a couple of tracks off of this, and going back to this now and listening to it in full, I'm kind of surprised just like how many tracks on this do kind of have themes of low self-esteem and depression on this. That kind of seems to be like a central theme of the album, to my surprise. But yeah, like despite this initially maybe coming off as just another 90s alt-rock album, I do feel that there are elements about it that maybe Radiohead stands out from other bands that were doing kind of a similar thing. So it's not just, just another 90s rock album. It stands out in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think they make their stand in a lot of different places too. I mean, like, there were grunge albums in the 90s that are going to be like all-time 90s grunge albums, right? And I don't know that this is compared to those, but also this like hits a lot of the same notes better. It's not just generic radio grunge. There's a whole lot, like, you can actually feel the emotion. I think that there's pop elements to this that would have been popular then and still stand apart now, even if they weren't chart topping then, right? Like this hits a whole lot of the right notes in a whole lot of different places that I think makes this stand out from just about anything else of that time period.
Yeah, I think if I had heard this when it came out, I'd be interested to see what they did after this. I'd be invested.
Yeah, if I actually had the if I had on my music taste now back then, yeah, I definitely think I probably would have enjoyed this a lot, actually. It definitely, I honestly, I could almost echo everything Teddy said. It definitely has that grunge feel, but it's not necessarily exactly comparable to the other grunge stuff in that era. But overall, this was honestly very different from what I was expecting. You're right, but also really good.
All right. So given that I have heard other albums after this, I'm not really sure how I would place this just quite yet. I'll kind of wait and see as we progress further through the discography what you guys think about everything else. But next week we'll be doing their second album, The Bends, which I have actually not heard yet. I don't think I've heard any songs off of it at all, so very curious to see how they followed this one up.
Yeah, I am too.
Alrighty, well, I think that about does it. I got nothing else. Catch y'all next time.
Mm-hmm.